Welcome to Hockenheim. This the second meeting of the season for the International GT Open, and this a new circuit for the GT Open competitors to learn and enjoy racing around this weekend, as the pit lane is now open. The car's on track for this 30-minute session, which will set the grid for the third race of the season. We kicked off about a month ago in Paul Ricard, where the wins went to one apiece to the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghinis, with Giacomo Altoe and Albert Costa taking the checker flag in race one, and in race two it was Michael Grenier and Norbert Siedler who took the win. This, though, promising to be a very different proposition for the drivers this weekend, and it was the target racing by Raton Lamborghini that was quickest in free practice yesterday. Alberto De Falco and Christoph Lenz, with then the Row Racing Sun Energy Mercedes of Kenny Harpel and Thomas Jaeger. There is Michael Grenier piloted Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini, took victory in the second of the races in Paul Ricard. Well, the drivers have got 30 minutes to play with. They have got their allocation of Michelin tyres for the weekend to use strategically, because they've got a 70-minute race later on this afternoon. They've got the qualifying 60-minute race to look forward to tomorrow, and that means that we have got some cars taking to the circuit early on in the session, others biding their time. We have got also new to the grid this weekend the Get Speed Performance Mercedes of Janine Hill and John Schaffner, and it is Janine Hill who's currently the wheel of that car. Tom Onslow Cole is to be the first of the drivers out onto a flying lap, as is Alessio Rivera in one of the trio of Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. Also worth watching for this weekend is going to be the Optima Motorsport Aston Martin of Oliver Wilkinson, and also Darren Turner. There it is, and Darren Turner, very, very experienced driver, World Championship level, coming into partner Ollie Wilkinson for this weekend, as the team learn the Aston Martin around some of these European circuits. Wilkinson keen to get the power down, getting on his way. Other cars, of course, pausing and waiting in the pit lane, including Alexander Aquino's Mercedes. Aquino and Martin Conrad having a very successful weekend in Paul Ricard in the AM class. So it's currently Fabio Anidi who is fastest in one of the Lazarus Racing Lamborghinis. That's the car that he shares with Eliseo Martinez, and there indeed it is Anidi, a time of 1 minute 39.324. But then Antonio Coimbra second to 1 minute 39.9, but we'd expect to see those times tumbling down a little bit as the session unfolds. Behind Anidi on the road is Tom Onslow Cole with the SPS Automotive Mercedes, one of the two SPS Automotive fielded cars in the entry, the other in the hands of Miguel Ramos, and indeed there it is. Pulling up, door open, adjustments being made. Ramos looking fairly relaxed at the wheel of the car, just making a couple of adjustments as Alessio Rivera goes quickest. The car that he shares with Daniel Zampieri, and Rivera and Zampieri on very good form in Paul Ricard. Rivera 1 minute 38.469, and looking for further improvement as we follow the progress of Michael Grenier. His teammate Albert Costa has just gone third. Naji Razak up into fourth in the Umbra Racing Lamborghini. As Grenier accelerates out of the final turn and goes up briefly into fourth place. That shuffles immediately to fifth because Martin Kodrich has just gone second in one of the Teo Martin Motorsport McLarens. Here then is Alessio Rivera, currently the fastest of the cars in the session. And Rivera, he's just been knocked off pole, in fact, by the Row Racing Sun Energy Mercedes of Thomas Jaeger. Rivera therefore has to find a tenth of a second to reclaim pole. And he does so, a 1 minute 38.0 for Alessio Rivera here. Then is Albert Costa, and Costa also up in the early stages of this lap. Up through sector 2 as well, as he peels into the stadium on towards the left-hand hairpin at the Sachs curve, using that corner's camber to good effect. And then sprinting through the last couple of twists and turns into the double right-hander that concludes the lap. Time of 1 minute 38.0 for Costa to beat. And Albert Costa accelerates through, goes second to 1 minute 38.115. Martin Kodrich, though, absolutely flying in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. We'll try and pick out where he is on track. The answer is he comes past us and goes quickest, a 1 minute 37.8 for Kodrich. So he moves the top of the times. And the Croatian was absolutely spectacular in France last time out. Really wringing the neck of that car. So the order, 7 minutes into session. Kodrich from Anidi, then it's Alessio Rivera in third, Albert Costa fourth, just ahead of Emil Frey Racing teammate Mikel Grenier in fifth. Thomas Jaeger goes fourth now, so Jaeger makes the improvement. Alberto Di Folco also moves up into sixth position here. Then is Indy Doncic in the HTTP Motorsport Winwood Racing Mercedes, returning to the International GT Open. We saw them in Barcelona last year, and this, at the moment, a very good lap from the Dutchman as he accelerates out of the Sachs curve. And this circuit that really, from free practice, it seems to be one that the Mercedes is going to enjoy, as Indy Deutsche goes fastest, a 1 minute 37.625, as dust getting kicked up in front of the Mercedes of Thomas Jaeger, and that was Alberto Di Folco having a little bit of a moment. That's through the parabolic at turn 5 on towards the hairpin. Now is Doncic going to keep that lap that we saw? He was out over the curbs a couple of times, and he is motoring. Meanwhile, Matt Griffin has gone second in the Spirit of Race Ferrari. So Griffin up to second position in the car that he shares with Duncan Cameron. Martin Kodrich shuffled down to third then. Fabio Anidi in fourth. Alessio Rivera in fifth. Thomas Jaeger sixth. Albert Costa seventh. Oliver Wilkinson up in eighth. Alberto Di Folco in ninth. And Fran Rueda completes the top 10. Raider, of course, had that disappointment race to Paul Ricard, turn 2 instant, tangling with both his Teo Martin Motorsport teammates, but it was Raider and Marcello Hahn who were out of the race on the spot. It's back into the pits then for Miguel Ramos. Martin Kodrich also in the pits. A chance to look up close at the immaculately prepared Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. Really, really good-looking car, and one that has been, for the evidence we've seen so far this season, immediately onto the pace. We're only a third of the way through the session, so no need to be too urgent from the mechanics. It's heading towards turn 1, Giuseppe Cipriani in his Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. He is being pursued by Albert Costa, and Costa has lost one of his lap times of this session, not the one that he's just set, that has propelled him up into third position, and the gaps at the front of the field are absolutely minute. We've got the top 14 cars, rounded out by Frederick Schandorf, separated by just 0.9 of a second, as Oliver Wilkinson improves. He goes fifth now, a 1 minute 37.935. There are vast improvement going on all the way through the field. Two cars we've not yet seen, which are Christopher Frogger in his Ferrari, the Spirit of Race Tempesta racing car, and also Alexander Fraquina as well in the HTP Motorsport Mercedes. So Costa, he was up in sector 1. He is up though behind Giuseppe Cipriani. as he approaches the more technical section of the track, and Costa would appear to have backed right out of that lap. Door shut for Alessio Rivera, initial pace setter in the session. He's now faded to 11th. Plenty of interested spectators in the pit boxes watching what is going on as Berto Di Folco closes up onto the tail of Thomas Jaeger. They are currently 8th and 10th respectively. And Di Folco was up through the first sector. Jaeger, though, was actually fractionally quicker than him, but Di Folco really closing up on Thomas Jaeger now through sector 2. And this is going to be a frustration here for Alberto Di Folco. So he's on a good lap, man who was quickest in free practice yesterday. He's not able to find a way around the Mercedes and has to back out of the lap. So that means for the first time in the session, we had a glut of times being set early and all beginning to just calm itself down a little bit. 18 minutes to run. So Di Folco winding himself up for another lap. Just behind him, a glimpse of the Get Speed Performance Mercedes of Janine Hill. That car currently in 21st position. Accelerating through. Di Folco taking a big by the curb through turn 1, running out a little bit wide on the exit, and they've got to be careful. Lots of warning flags being shown during the early stage of this session up towards turn 2. And Di Folco not quite his best through the first sector. Janine Hill also not quite her best. On towards the hairpin at turn 6. Really, really tight right-hand hairpin. Have to get on the power as early as possible. Di Folco out over the curb, blasts down the first half of the back stretch. Now here is Miguel Ramos, and Ramos, who'd been out of the pits early on, is really flying. This is first flying lap of substance. Just got a couple of corners to go. He earned Fabrizio Cristani right in the mix in Paul Ricard, second on the road, in fact, in race 2, before a penalty bumped them back to 3rd. And Ramos, that lap, good enough for 15th position in the end for Miguel Ramos. So his best, but he's still got about 9/10 to find towards pole position at the moment. Much of the field currently in the pit lane, exceptions being Tom Onslow Cole, Berto Di Folco, Alessio Rivera, who's winding up his pace. Now here is Onslow Cole, who's just set a personal best through the middle sector and completes this lap, which is one that's good enough to move up to 4th position at 1 minute 37.842. But now Onslow Cole can really push. He's got the advantage of a near enough empty circuit with which to try and set a mark for pole. He needs to find just over 3.5 tenths of a second. Miguel Ramos, another driver who is busy finding time. He's a couple of tenths of a second up on where he was a lap ago. So he heads towards turn 10, comes back into the view of the circuit that we have from the commentary box into the final section. He's lost a little bit of ground through the middle sector. As we picked up the shot, we just saw him maybe a little bit offline, and that has cost him 1/10 of a second or thereabouts. So unless he's found something through the last sector, then unlikely that he's going to improve on the 1 minute 38.4 that he set last time around. And he doesn't. A 1 minute 38.451, so just 0.05 of a second adrift from where he was. Meanwhile, Onslow Cole is on a very, very good lap as he heads towards the Sachs Curve hairpin. Onslow Cole's gone quicker than anybody through the middle sector. Here he is then, just a couple of corners to go. It wasn't a great first sector though from Onslow Cole. Has he made up the ground though through the second couple of sectors? which seems to be the section of the circuit that really suits the Mercedes. Across the line then for Onslow Cole. No, he doesn't, in fact. And that lap 4 thousandths of a second slower than he managed last time around, despite that brilliant middle sector. Alessio Rivera, meanwhile, on his second run, not making much ground at all. He remains in 11th position in the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. We're over halfway through the session now. The clock ticking down. And most of the front runners currently in the pit lane. Onslow Cole, much better first sector this time, just under a tenth of a second adrift of the fastest first sector. It's the middle sector that's the fairly lengthy section of the lap, as Onslow Cole is on really the second half of the back straight, towards the end of sector 2. And now Onslow Cole is really on it. Is he going to be able to sustain it through sector 3? If he can, this should be good enough for second position at the moment, possibly a little bit more. The car trying to understeer through the Sachs curve on towards the last couple of corners now. And Onslow Cole, he navigates the double right-hander. Throttle down, accelerates on his way. Comes across the line, and he does go second. A 1 minute 37.569, 800th of a second adrift of pole position. So good lap there from Tom Onslow Cole. Is there anything more to come, though, from the SPS Automotive Mercedes? Another look. Onslow Cole really working the car hard. That looks like it's the exit of turn 1. Out over the curb. And Onslow Cole, first sector on this lap, has been another good one. He turns through the hairpin at turn 6. Gets the power down, accelerates on his way. Meanwhile, Davide Roda has just moved into pole position in the AM class, in 15th place overall. More work going on. Teo Martin Motorsport pit box. That's Fran Rueda just calling himself off. It's interesting to see how long several of the teams are taking to pause in the pits. Here then is Alessio Rivera, who remains marooned in 11th position. And Rivera's really had no joy at all on this run. Towards the Sachs curve he goes. On the brakes, the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes, the front of the car dips under braking. Through the left-hand hairpin and through the little chicane in towards the double right-handers to close the lap. Meanwhile, Giaton Liang's just come past us and gone up into 10th place, as Rivera also calls a halt to that run. There's not too many improvements going on out on track at the moment, and many of our pole position challengers currently in the pits. And that suggests to me that the teams, probably from the long runs yesterday, are taking a view on just how much they want to conserve their Michelin tyres for the race later on this afternoon. So the classification, 2/3 of the session, is Indy Doncia is currently quickest. Tom Onslow Cole is second. Matt Griffin third. Albert Costa is fourth. Martin Kodrich fifth. Oliver Wilkinson sixth. 7th to Mikel Grenier. 8th Alberto Di Folco. 9th Fabio Anidi. 10th Giaton Liang. And 11th is the man we ride with now, and that is Thomas Jaeger in the Row Racing Sun Energy 1 Mercedes that he shares with Kenny Harble. And Jaeger, when we see him in the International GT Open, he is always right at the front of the field. And how is this session going to stick with that run of form? Well, he's done his best first sector of anybody on this lap, and his best first sector of the session, rather. Picking his way through the middle of the lap now. It's the Mercedes turns at 8, 9 and 10, and then blasting back towards the stadium section. Meanwhile, Jiatong Liang's put together a very good lap in his Lamborghini. The Raton Racing by Target car, and goes 5th at 1 minute 37.7, and Liang really impressive in Paul Ricard as well, with a big step up, relatively speaking, from where he was a year ago. As in car with Jaeger, Alberto Di Folco's just gone fastest of anybody through the first sector. Jaeger comes out the final turn now, accelerates through, across the line he goes, and Thomas Jaeger goes 6th with a 1 minute 37.764. It is phenomenally close at the front of the field. The top 8 separated by just under 0.4 of a second. And that is very, very close. Now here is Oliver Wilkinson in the Optimum Motorsport Aston Martin, and Wilkinson is not likely to improve. It's the car, though, that was just in front of him on the road of Alberto Di Folco that really is. And Di Folco, who's currently in 10th position, he's heading through the final couple of turns on the lap as we watch the Aston Martin. So the pace setter from free practice yesterday comes past me now to complete his lap, and Alberto Di Folco goes 2nd with a 1 minute 37.5. So we've got the top 3 in the session now separated by just 0.08 of a second. Matt Griffin behind Ollie Wilkinson goes fastest, so Griffin in the Spirit of Race Ferrari, which is the white and green car that you'll see just behind the Aston Martin, goes top with a 1 minute 37.114. Here is Griffin, and that was a lap that improved as it went on. Fastest third sector of anybody, but it's not done yet. Onslow Cole, meanwhile, has gone quicker than anybody through the first sector. 7.5 minutes to go. So it's Griffin from Donche, then Alberto Di Folco in 3rd, Onslow Cole 4th, Albert Costa in 5th. But Onslow Cole is on a good one, or he was. He runs out very, very wide through turn 11. Hopefully that's not going to see him getting pinged for track limits. Can't think it would have particularly helped his cause. He was only a 10th of a second up through the first 2 sectors, and therefore Onslow Cole hasn't got an awful lot of time to risk by sliding the car. Cross line he comes then, and he does take pole position, a 1 minute 36.975 for Onslow Cole. All smiles. Mercedes looks like that's Bernd Schneider there having a watch of proceedings this weekend, as Ollie Wilkinson meanwhile has gone fastest of anybody through sector 2. So we've got at the moment Mercedes from Ferrari, from Mercedes, from Lamborghini, and then we've got Aston Martin and McLaren all in the mix, as Martin Kodrich and Fran Rader have both just emerged for the Teo Marti Motorsport team. So we'll expect to see the McLarens coming back at it, as Onslow Cole is on another good lap here. Fastest of anybody through the first sector once more. And we saw, of course, last time around that slight moment at turn 11 for Onslow Cole, so there might be a little bit of time left available to him. We're talking absolute minute fractions of a second here. Onslow Cole sweeping into view in the stadium once more, and he's up again through sector 2, and well up through sector 2. Almost 0.3 of a second here for Onslow Cole. And this is proving to be a very impressive lap that might just break the spirit of some of his rivals. We will see. Out the final turn, then Onslow Cole accelerating, looking to break the time beam now, and he does improve, a 1 minute 36.759 for Tom Onslow Cole. So that now gives him a buffer of 0.3 of a second over the rest of the field. There's the classification for you on the left-hand side of your picture. So it is the Mercedes and the Ferrari currently fighting out for pole position. Here, meanwhile, is Indy Donche, who held pole for much of the middle of the session. He's 0.02 of a second up on Onslow Cole's best through sector 1. Through turns 8, 9 and 10 now. Down towards the end of sector 2. He swings back into view. He's a little bit adrift, in fact quite a way adrift, half a second back from Onslow Cole's best. Meanwhile, Alberto Di Folco has posted another improvement. He's now leapt up into 3rd position. So it is Mercedes from Ferrari from Lamborghini. Alessio Rivera goes 4th. Frantinelli Motorsport, 1 minute 37.4. Oh, and that's a big off for Fabio Anidi in the Lazarus Lamborghini. And the car grinds to a halt, just trying to pick out where that may be. And hopefully that's not going to bring out a red flag. And hopefully, of course, the driver's okay. It appears that he had a bit of a thump into the concrete wall. Indeed, it's right underneath our commentary box coming out of the final turn that Anidi has come off the circuit. And it's a red flag. So the session being stopped with 3.5 minutes to go. And so the session is stopped for the incident involving Fabio Anidi. Now here's what happened. Big lose. Oh, and he thumps. He just catches the end of the concrete wall as at the lip towards the marshal's post. That was a nasty angle to go, and at high speed as well for the Lamborghini driver. And marshals on the scene immediately underneath us. It would so it's going to take a moment or two to sort out that incident. So the damage to the front of the Lamborghini fairly substantial. So the classification then at the red flag is Tom Onslow Cole, fastest from Matt Griffin, 3rd for Indy Doncia, 4th to Alberto Di Folco, Fran Rueda 5th for Teo Marti Motorsport, and it's the McLaren squad who've really lost out with this red flag because both Fran Rueda and Martin Kodrich were looking to line up for decent laps here, and that unfortunately has rather gone away from them. They're going to have just time for an out lap and then one flyer when the session does resume. And I'm pleased to report that Fabio Anidi is getting out of the car. Here's another look at it. He just clips the edge of the concrete wall, and actually, he could, had he been a couple of metres further along, that could have been a much nastier impact. As it was, it's just the driver's side was squeezed right against the concrete barrier. Anidi is out of the car and walking away. There he is, I'm pleased to say. He is just having a bit of a consultation with the doctor, just checking everything's okay. I think as much as anything, it was more that the pilot couldn't really get out because it was driver's side against the concrete barrier, but a potentially quite nasty incident. And this Hockenheim circuit, although when the new layout was constructed very much a state-of-the-art facility, is still a circuit where errors can be punished. So as soon as we know when the restart is going to happen and for how long, we shall, of course, let you know. Meanwhile, we are in for a cracking race this afternoon, that is for sure. The top 11 of them, all covered by just under a second. But we're talking the top 20, covered by just 2 seconds. So it's going to be a bit of a scramble. The big winners of this red flag, you would suggest, are some of the Mercedes squads, because they were just coming towards the end of their quick runs. But it was really Fran Rueda and Martin Kodrich, who Rueda had just snuck up into 5th position, was lining up for his second flying lap. Kodrich, having been right up there early on in the session, hadn't then just been on a flying lap at the point the red flag came out, and so no scope for him to improve it. In terms of the AM classification, it's Davide Roda, who is currently the fastest of the AM cars from Giuseppe Cipriani, and then Antonio Coimbra. As the cars queuing up in the fast lane. 3 3/4 minutes left on the clock when they do get underway. And there, Michael Grenier taking a big run out wide through turn 1. Really quick entry to turn 1. Blind-ish right-hander as you turn in at high speed. So the car's up in the pit lane. you can see. I can see the front of Fabio Anidi's Lamborghini being pulled clear of the concrete wall. Unfortunately, the front left-hand corner is pretty substantially damaged. They're going to have to load that onto a flatbed truck, I'd imagine, before that car can be cleared away and the session resumed. The race this afternoon gets underway at around about 4:30 local time, Central European time, so do make sure that you join us for the third race of the International GT Open season. We were treated to two really wonderful races in Paul Ricard, and what we saw was that the balance of performance between the different marks in the championship very, very evenly matched, and certainly the way that this qualifying session has played out with 4 different manufacturers in the top 5 places suggests that that is continuing on to Hockenheim. So a fair bit of work to do between now and 4 for the Lazarus mechanics. A chance as well to make a few adjustments or just clear the circuit a little bit. It was an unusual place for Anidi to use it. The car just snapping away from him through the final turn, and rather than a spin, as he corrects it, then just fired him off. There is a look at the car of Janine Hill in the Get Speed Mercedes, and she is currently in 24th position, having a good battle though amongst, for second place in the AM class, Cipriani, Coimbra, Raquina and Hill, all covered by just a fraction over a second, so that is going to be a fight well worth watching later on this afternoon. For now though, all paused in the pit lane. As underneath our commentary box, discussion underway about how to best recover the car of Fabio Onidi. And this is the first time back in Germany for several years for the International GT Open. Last time out was at the Nürburgring on a freezing cold weekend. The sun was out, but it was only 1 or 2 degrees, and that made for some very interesting racing, as the drivers really having to rely on aerodynamic grip to try and get a little bit of heat into their tyres on that occasion. This time around, the conditions this weekend a bit warmer, still not quite full-blown summer heat, and also a fairly stiff breeze. Hockenheim, as the Ansaldi Motorsport team consult on the pit wall. Alessio Rivera currently in 6th position, and I think the really big question is going to be how many cars are we going to see resuming for the final 3 minutes or so of the session, and will any of them be able to make an improvement? Miguel Ramos is one of the drivers that is in the queue, and Ramos currently 16th overall, 1.5 seconds away from pole position. A former champion in the International GT Open, as is his co-driver, Fabrizio Crostani. They came perilously close to winning the Pro-Am Championship last year, eventually losing out on drop scores and count back, and this year elevated to the Pro class and were right there in the mix in Paul Ricard in particular. An inspired drive from Crostani in the second half of race 2, and just took him a little bit too long to clear the car of Daniel Zampieri, and when he finally did so, involved a little bit of a bump. But even with just a couple of clear laps, it allowed Crostani to really pressurise Michael Grenier as they headed towards the checkered flag. So the Oxford Motorsport Aston Martin, it's a busy season for Ollie Wilkins, running a couple of programmes in that car, really building he and the team's knowledge of the new for 2019 Aston Martin, and with Darren Turner alongside him this weekend, that is a car that is surely going to be in the running for certainly Pro-Am podiums, but also possibly a little bit more, because looking down the qualifying times, Wilkinson is by far the fastest of the AM qualifiers in the Pro-Am class. He's 12th overall at the moment, in fact ahead of Alam Kader in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren, with Christopher Froggatt and Frederick Schandorf, the 2 other AMs qualifying in the Pro-Am class in this session, down in 17th and 18th respectively. So that sets Wilkinson and Turner up well for the race later on. And it's interesting, new circuit for the GT Open this weekend. A lot of the Pro-Am combinations electing to put their pro out in this session, including Indy Dotcher and Matt Griffin. Two cars that we're currently watching. Onslow Cole as well, of course, the reigning Pro-Am champion in the International GT Open. He and Valentin Pierberg taking the title very late on Barcelona, as we've got confirmation on a timing screen. It's going to be 5 minutes or so until the pit lane opens at 17 minutes past the hour. They might be able to bring that forward a minute or two. The recovery of Onidi's car is pretty much complete now, I'm pleased to report. And there is the slightly sorry sight of the Lazarus Lamborghini on the flatbed truck now. Here's another look at it, sideways through the final turn, then the car snaps away from him. Destination barrier, fortunately, almost the lip at the Marsh of the Skate route, just stopping a slightly blunter impact against the concrete wall, but he's damaged the front left corner of the car fairly substantially. That is the work that will have to be undertaken by the Team Lazarus mechanics over the course of the next 4 hours or so. And fingers crossed they'll be able to complete that work and Onidi take his place on the grid. He was 14th in the session at that point. So the incident has been cleared. The track is pretty much clear. There is a look at the Vincenzo Sospiri Racing entry of Frederick Scharndorf at the wheel for this session alongside Kang Ling. And the Vincenzo Sospiri Racing team having a great time in Paul Ricard. Not only did Scharndorf and Ling go well in the Pro-Am class, but also in the GT Cup, which returns in Spa-Francorchamps in a fortnight's time. The Vincenzo Sospiri Racing team, who were the dominant force over the course of the weekend. It's just 2 minutes until the car's released. They've got 3 3/4 minutes. And realistically, that is going to give them an outlap and 1 flying lap. So whether or not we're going to see any improvements will be interesting, because it's been a fairly lengthy pause for the recovery of Onidi's car. And that means that had it been a very brief red flag just for a car in the gravel trap, for example, then they may have kept some heat in the Michelin tyres. As it is, they're going to have to try and warm those tyres up fairly rapidly. Ollie Wilkinson in the queue, as is Indy Dotcher. He's just behind Giuseppe Cipriani, because of course the other factor in all of this is going to be whether or not they can get the track space to have a good shot at pole position, because with 23 cars potentially venturing out onto the circuit, then it is going to be very, very busy out there. Glimpse there of Naji Razak in the Ombra Racing Lamborghini, just lined up behind Ollie Wilkinson, and Razak currently in 20th place overall. He and Federico Ley are having a slightly tougher time of it in Paul Ricard. So 1 minute until the restart, as the marshals returning to their posts. And the track through the final turn swept clear of the gravel. Christopher Frogger in the Tempesta Racing Spirit of Race Ferrari, currently in 17th position. And then the brace of Target Lamborghinis. Alberto Di Folco currently 4th overall. Raton Racing by Target entry, and Jiatong Liang also having a good session. He's currently in 11th place. So the track goes green now, and there's queue of cars, and there you see Martin Kodrich and Fran Rueda, also Alam Kader. The trio of Ter Marti Motorsport and McLarens were the ones that really lost out with the red flag. What can they do? Can they get the heat into the Michelin tyre over the course of a single lap and then press on? They may. It's a big, big ask here. They may just squeak 2 flying laps out of this as well. with the ideal track position. Touch and go, whether or not they can do it, but it might just be on the cards if it is a very, very quick outlap for Alain Cadet and Martin Kodrich. 3 minutes to run in the session then. And we're not going to see the Raton Lamborghinis out once more. I don't think we're either going to see the Spirit of Race Ferraris. They are poised on the blocks. The Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes have also called it a session, as has our provisional pole sitter, Tom Onslow Cole. Fran Rueda, championship runner-up last year, alongside Andres Sravia, back for another challenge for Teo Martin Motorsport. Of course, the switch from BMW to McLaren over the course of the winter doesn't seem to slow them down one jot. Although, of course, that disappointment early on in race 2, Paul Ricard really ruining Sravia and Rueda's chances of a race victory, which certainly strategy-wise was a possibility for them. Instead out at turn 2. So what can Rueda do? Meanwhile, flashing past me now come Alain Cadet and Martin Kodrich. They are going to have a chance here for 2 flying laps, as just is Fran Rueda. So watch this space. The Teo Martin Motorsport McLarens, they've got very, very good track position upon the resumption of the session. It's really going to be a question now of whether or not they can get that heat into the tyres. Others, they are all in a queue. They know that it's going to be 1 flying lap, and that is it. So Rueda it's going to have to be the last lap of the session. He's 4/10 off through the first sector, and that's what we'd have expected. 2 laps to get the heat into the Michelin tyre, and then 1 lap to really push. It's going to be the 3 Teo Martin Motorsport McLarens plus the car of Nicola Di Marco and the sister Lazarus Lamborghini that are going to be the ones with the opportunity here to really challenge for shuffling up the order a little bit for Fran Rueda. He needs to find 7/10 of a second for pole position. It's not going to do it on this lap, of course. The clock ticks down all the while. Nicola Di Marco is going to be first driver of the resumed session set a time, and Di Marco may even smuggle a slight improvement from it. 20 seconds to go. Matt Griffin watching in the Ferrari pit box as Di Marco goes through, doesn't improve, but crucially, Cadet comes past me. Kodrich doesn't. Kodrich and Rueda both into the pits in their McLarens. So their opportunity to improve has gone. It's just Alain Cadet then. He's looking for a lap with Fran Rueda in 5th, Martin Kodrich in 9th. Guess rather than really pushing the tyre and the car and risking it, they can improve through the race. Alain Cadet, though, will look to press on. Meanwhile, Albert Costa has got the opportunity maybe for a slight improvement. He charges into the final turn now. The checker flag is out. The Emerald Frey Racing Lamborghini of Costa, he was up through sector 2. He doesn't quite improve. A 1 minute 37.9, playing his best of a 1 minute 37.6. So no scope for improvement there for Albert Costa. So is anybody going to be able to improve? Most of the field now darting towards the pits. Alain Cadet, who did continue for 1 more lap, wasn't up through sector 1. Nicola Di Marco also not up through sector 1. Naji Razak into the stadium now. The Ombra Racing. In fact, my mistake. He's heading through the turns 8, 9 and 10 now. Down the back stretch, it is Di Marco and Cadet who are in view. And Alain Cadet isn't going to complete the lap. Nicola Di Marco is. So Nicola Di Marco takes the checkered flag and makes a fractional improvement. He goes up into 18th place. So it's going to be pole position for Tom Onslow Cole. Of that, there is no doubt. And of the cars that continue to circulate, they are all more or less peeling into the pit lane. Nobody is looking likely to make an improvement through the resume session. And the timing of the red flag such that it just didn't quite allow them to get the heat into the tyres and then really push for a time. Nonetheless, it is a tantalising grid that we have got formed for this third race of the International GT Open season. We are underway at around about 4:30 Central European time this afternoon. Make sure you join us for that.
Tom Onslow again on pole. 2 out of 2. You must be happy.
Yeah, very happy. We seem to be on a really nice roll here. The SPS team are just so on top of the game. Again, in the first higher run that we had there, we were close for sure. I think we were P2, but just just missing something on track. I gave my feedback and suggestions. They made some changes, and really a big improvement for the second run. So it's always exciting with these guys.
Again, a fast track. You seem to like those.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I don't think there's a calendar on the track I don't like, but this was my first time here. I hadn't been here before yesterday, but I really like this place, and it's nice that it's our home team for SPS, our home race even. So this is a lovely way to start the weekend with all our guests and friends and family.
Well done, and all the best for later.
Thank you very much. Fingers crossed.
So delighted Tom Onslow with his qualifying performance. He takes pole position then from Matt Griffin in second. Indy Joncha will line up in third place ahead of Alberto Di Folco. Fran Raider then in fifth with Alessio Rivera in to sixth. Chance to enjoy Onslow Cole, the top qualifiers at work. Spectacular stuff. So here then is how they've qualified, with Onslow Cole then taking pole position 3.5 tenths second clear of the Spirit of Race Ferrari of Matt Griffin. Indy Joncha in the HTP Motorsport Winwood Racing Mercedes in third from Alberto Di Folco, Raton Racing by Target fourth. Fran Raider in fifth, leading the Teo Marti Motorsport McLaren charge. Alessio Rivera in sixth. Mikel Grenier and Albert Costa, the winners in round one, looking out row four, clear of Martin Kodrich, and then Thomas Jaeger, who completes the top 10. And that promises to give us some really good racing. Jiatong Liang then lines up in 11th, clear of Ollie Wilkinson. Alan Cadera in 13th. Fabio Benidi in 14th after his incident brought out the red flag. Davide Roda, AM-class pole in 15th from Miguel Ramos and Christopher Frogger. Nicola DeMarco in 18th, ahead of Frederick Schandorf. Naji Razak rounding out the top 20. And then a really good AM-class battle in prospect with Giuseppe Cipriani, Antonio Coimbra, Alexandra Raquina and Janine Hill, all closely matched on time. Join us at about 4:20 Central European time this afternoon. It promises to be a great third race of the International GT Open season. Until then, it's goodbye from Hockenheim.